O'clock. On.
Just a second.
Should be good.
Is it rolling?
Yeah, that's running. It's just very quiet for some reason.
Okay. Good afternoon. It is Monday, October 7th. It is 4 o'clock, and this is a regular meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District and our annual budget hearing. My name is Jeff Randall. I am president of the board, and I am calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. For purposes of compliance with the Rural Utility Service obligations, this regular meeting will also serve as the annual meeting for the Public Utility District number 1 of Jefferson County. So let's do a roll call. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board and commissioner for District 1.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, so agenda review, just want to make sure we're clear on everything. One thing I was going to suggest is it says, so item number 10 says recess to 2024 budget hearing. And that's supposed to happen at 5, right? Because we've advertised it at 5. So I guess my addition would be at 5 o'clock, recess to 2024 budget hearing. And if we get done with the stuff before or later, we'll just make that modification to the agenda. I think that was the only change.
So you're asking for
I
a
saw.
modification to put the time?
Yeah, just
on-
number 10 says recess to 2024 budget hearing. What it really should say is at 5 o'clock, recess to 2024 budget hearing.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as modified.
Second.
All in favor of approving the modified agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Think we got it. And so the next item is public comment. So anybody, let me read the public comment notification. Public comment period allows members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president and are not permitted to disturb or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the president, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. So who would like to go first?
Can I sit here? or-
Yeah, you can sit there. It's picked up pretty good by
Picked up
that
good, okay.
mic. Yeah.
Either up there or down here.
Okay. My name is Bruce Eisert. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Bruce Eisert. I'm a resident of 190 Pinecrest Drive in California. The reason I'm here is kind of get some clarification on your customer service policy, in particular how it relates to your water leak adjustment. And we had a leak in this past spring, pretty major leak, 275,000 gallons during a month, I think. And we did get an adjustment of $1,000 on our bill in June, I believe, or July. But my question and concern had to deal with the clause in your policy 10.3.3 under water leak adjustment, where it says once the estimated loss is calculated, the customer will pay the first tier water consumption rate for the lost water. And my bill was adjusted based on the higher tier rate. So I did get the $1,000 adjustment, but it was from the higher tier rate. And I appreciate that, but I was just wondering what is this policy? Am I reading it correctly? It seems to be pretty cut and dry to me, but I just wanted to be sure I was on the right page, so to speak. So
Okay, is that everything or do you have anything else to add?
Just that I think I understand. I just need some clarification of why. I think I know why you have a higher tier rate because of demand. You're trying to manage demand, and so my thought is that if this is definitely a leak, and if you charge a higher rate, a higher tier rate, that's like rubbing salt on a wound. It just So anyway, that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, so I guess so what we don't want to do is have like back and forth happen at this point. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. The question I'm hearing is, has the leak adjustment been done according to policy? Because as he stated it, it made it sound like what we're supposed to be billing is at a tier 1, and it may have been billed at kind of the normal giving $1,000 credit. So I don't know if you know anything about this, Kevin, or we need to follow up on it.
So I am a little bit familiar with this, but I'm going to have to go back to Jean Pepper. She's the director for this group and verify some things, and we'll get back to you.
Okay, can I just add one thing? I did talk to Jean and I did talk to her. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say anything else.
I will
I talked to several people.
And I guess what you can do is you can get Kevin's contact info. You're free to email us to let us know when we have large leaks. Sometimes it takes a while to work through it. So thank you for bringing it to our attention, and feel free to reach out to Kevin and or us so we can
Thanks for
kind of
listening.
bird dog it a little bit.
Out of curiosity, that was quite a massive leak. What caused it?
We're not sure, but it must have been a tree root or something that did. It was something we didn't notice at all in the house. There was no reduction in water pressure. There was no pond of water, no
geysers.
no geysers. Yeah, I mean, I think the trees are very happy. We're very happy.
They sucked it up in the middle of the
Yeah.
summer.
Surprising that it, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, well, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Stay tuned and
Okay,
reach out
appreciate it.
as needed. Okay, Phil.
Bill Stover, District 1. Just looking for an update, if there is one, on the substation transformer shuffle project.
And I guess the question on that is that appropriate to talk about during budget, because there's or manager's report, because there's like a $12 million line item for capital projects / substation in the budget.
I can give a brief update in manager's report.
Okay. That okay, Phil? Anything else?
Just remind me.
Okay. And it looks like we have a hand up by someone that says Mike on our screen. So Mike, go ahead if you can hear us. You have 3
I
minutes.
can hear you. Let me see, so you can see my,
Hold on a second.
Not hearing you.
We don't have the volume up. We're gonna do some checking, so stay tuned, and we haven't started your clock yet.
hey, Dan, was this the meeting for me to comment or the next meeting?
What was, are you?
This has to do
talk
with
about
the tree pruning.
It's not on the agenda.
The tree pruning? Yeah, I don't think it's on the agenda, so go ahead and try again, your volume.
I'm here, Mike
Yep, we
Gleason.
can hear you. Go ahead, and your name again is? And
Hi,
your-
my name is Mike Gleason. I live at 234 Talashore Drive in Port Ludlow.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. I met Scott Bancroft last May while he was looking at my 8-foot Kwanzan cherry trees at the front of my property. He was very cordial and informative of the upcoming work of pruning and tree removal along my street. I was informed my 3 trees would need to be moved or cut down by this fall to prevent future power line interference risks. My initial reaction was my only choice was to move the over $500 in trees I planted only a year ago. I then offered to record with the county that I would be responsible for keeping the trees at least 18 inches below the overhead power line. My reasoning being, at full maturity, the trees might reach the bottom of the power lines. My understanding of physics taught me that a broken branch short of a hurricane will fall downward, not upward, when separated from the tree. I feel this is a good compromise and no cost for the county. My offer has since been rejected. Mr. Bancroft mentioned the recent pruning of trees to replace a power pole at 370 Talashore Drive and neighboring 410 Talashore Drive as a good example of the process. Upon observation of these 2 sites, the trees pruned only had lower branches removed while branches remain above. I suspect this may be incomplete work, as the need at the time was for protecting workers from sagging lines during the power pole replacement. If these 2 properties are indeed reflective of the completed process, they are not mitigating the higher branches nor following the 10-foot either side of the easement rule that I read in the regulation and a refresh of basic physics for the contractors needed. Last month, I invited Commissioner Dan to my property to discuss my situation and seek any options. Dan was equally cordial and informative as Mr. Bancroft. He shared the budget for tree clearing for the PUD has increased to $1 million a year. He didn't mention cleaning and pruning is on a 7-year cycle. I asked if my trees could remain until the next cycle, as they won't pose a risk to contact a power line above it, if at all. He indicated PUD attorneys would have to review that, and is one reason why I'm here today. And I understand pruning and trimming and cutting down trees is to commence next week. The other reason I'm here today is I believe there is a gap in risk mitigation options for the PUD. Early this year, across from 610 Talashore Drive, a tree split and fell across the road, taking out a power line to several homes. The outage, I recall, was for a few days. The other trunk of this tree remains, tilted at 70 degrees over the road. As I understand, since the tree does not reside in a PUD easement, there is no regulatory option to address it. It will be ironic for the PUD to do all the pruning and tree removal on Talashore starting next week and not be able to address, in my opinion, the highest risk to electrical service in our neighborhood.
And you're at 3 minutes, Mike, so wrap up if you can, if you have anything more.
You know, I had one sentence left, which was thank you for your time.
Go for it. Okay. Thank you.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay, this one sounds like it's kind of a timeliness issue in that there's work being
If I
done.
could, while Joel's on, Joel, I don't know if that was woven together well enough for Joel to understand. The main question that I had was if we can mitigate this by one, extending out to the next cycle, that would be one, and that's a policy change, I would imagine. I don't know. So that was one of the questions I had.
Okay, Joel?
I'm not sure I have a really full understanding of what the situation is out there. I'm sorry. I mean, if the trees,
start
it
with
sounds
actually
like the
what-
tree,
Can we start with what's there? Because I mean, it really matters if it's 3-phase power or, you know, what is there and how low is it below the wires, just out of curiosity.
So what,
Right now, they're 8 feet tall, and the power line sags down to about 20, 21 feet above the ground.
so what the crutch of this is in our policy, we don't want people planting trees underneath the power line.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see new trees planted on the power line, which we did with Mike, is we notified him that those trees really need to be moved.
Mm-hmm.
So
And is this 3-phase power or not?
single
just
phase
single
power
phase? Okay.
where the trees are, I believe. And the issue in here, a year ago, if the trees would have been moved, it would have been less stress on the trees because like I say, we don't want to cut the trees. We're trying to get the word out, not to plant underneath. You know, Scott does a pretty good job driving around and if he notices things, we do stop and talk to the owners. There are rules against anyone tree trimming below our power line. They're just not allowed to do it. They have to stay a minimum of 40 inches away from the line. You know, there's a lot of reasons we would probably say no to them taking the responsibility. To just postpone it to the next cycle, again, that is, by then, it is a problem. If we can get them moved now, the problem does go away and it makes it a better interaction. I have talked to Scott about this. Mike has been very congenial to the PUD. There's no issues here, but the trees technically, for the longevity of the trees, they should be moved.
and I'll just add one thing. I'm not sure it's legally significant for a property owner to accept that liability. I mean, you know, these are our power lines. They are inherently dangerous. It's up to the PUD and its policies that are in place right now to protect those lines. I assume they're in easements. And, you know, that's, you know, I can't really comment much more than that.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. That was kind of it, the landowner taking the liability for those trees was kind of was the inference there, whereas why I was headed. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that really means anything should something happen.
All right, and I guess the question I have is for Kevin. The notice that Mike got said, please move the trees, and if he doesn't move the trees, is it basically that we're gonna cut them when it's and what's the separation from the single phase to the top of the tree?
Well, because of broadband and everything else, our broadband, whether it's us, CenturyLink, whoever, is 40 inches below our neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the trees are supposed to be kept at 40 inches. They grow way up in them. And in a 7-year cycle.
We have to think about how big is this tree going to get in the next 7 years.
Yeah. And our first conversation was a year ago to move them because we knew this year we were going to be in this area to do our trimming.
So there was a conversation a year ago about
Is
moving
that
the
correct,
trees?
Mark? About a year ago?
Mike,
Or Mike? I
Not with
mean?
me. It was May this year, the first time Scott approached me.
okay.
Yeah, and the trees, I think they're deciduous trees,
Right.
and they're about 3 inches at the moment.
Right.
And I don't know, 12 feet tall, 10 feet tall, whatever Mike described was accurate, I believe.
And Mike, you said you planted them, or they were planted about a year ago?
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is they were planted to replace smaller trees of the same species that deer ate. So I think somebody on this board planted some deer in my neighborhood to try to take them out naturally. And so I tried to foil that. So currently, yeah, they're like 8 feet, 9 feet tall. So,
Well,
which is 10, 11 feet from the lower of the power line. A fully mature Kwanzan cherry may get to 21 feet. Depends on what you look on the internet, but you know, I'm hearing the message, gentlemen. I'm hearing the message.
Well, and if it makes you feel any better, I myself planted a red maple tree in my front yard, and then about a year later figured out that's not the right spot. And I had some non-power lines, some communication lines, but more I was worried about was this other maple that was just growing over the top of it. And I've decided it's just not going to be able to grow right based on
Yeah.
where it is. And I dug it up and I had to trim the roots a bit. And I did that in the summer, which is not the best time to do it. And it's doing it, you know, had a little shock time, but it's recovered. But it's a lot of work, you know, to move a tree that big that's a year old. But I'm guessing you could probably do it. And it sounds like the question is where they are now, they're probably not going to look like what you want them to look like after our guys come through and buzz them every.
Right.
So
yeah, so then just two final things, because I don't want to waste your guys' time, is one, you know, Joel, if you can still do a takeaway, if you want to come down, I'll show you on Talator Drive, that tree leaning over the road at 610. Okay. I know it's not in the easement because it's on the other side of the road from your power line, but it's half fell earlier this year. Okay. And I hate you guys get bad publicity for all the tree trimming. And then we have this tree that legally right now you can't do anything about it. But when Dan and I talked, it's a matter of, can you send the property owner a notice of something, you know, because it'd be a lot cheaper for someone to cut that tree down than for your truck to come out during a power outage and whatever. So I don't know, maybe you guys do have it. I have a generator. I can run a week on it, but some of my neighbors don't. They're elderly. I offer my freezer and all that shit. So And then
Yeah,
the other
I
thing
mean,
is,
you've highlighted one of the difficulties that electric utilities face in this area.
yeah,
Can that be dealt with if we ask the property owner, hey, you got this leaning tree in your property, can we come on and remove it?
Is it likely, do we have an opinion from someone, a forester or someone, tree specialist, that that tree is in conflict with our lines? That's the analysis we need to have, you know. You don't need to answer that right now, but that's the information we need. We need that opinion from someone. And if that's the case, then yeah, we have the right to do it, but there's a process that we have to go through.
Okay.
Yeah, and the size and type of trees in the right of way we have in the policy, that's something we can always review down the road. The one takeaway from this particular instance was that I wanted to kind of highlight was whether or not a landowner could take on some sort of liability or responsibility if we were to give them some sort of a, way out of the policy or amendment to the policy or whatever. Otherwise, we have to stick to the policy is the way I would look at it. And that was where the big question for me was, can we do that in the future if we were requested to? And if not, we should look at the policy and make that statement in the policy so that we don't keep running into this same issue.
Yeah.
And the other tree outside the property, that's a different issue. We
Yeah,
just see that.
off right away is a different question. You're right, Dan.
That's different issue. And we see that a lot. So that one we'll deal with on our own.
So I said to the previous speaker that we don't want to have more back and forth, but this is kind of a timely issue. Mike, are you looking for some follow-up from the PUD on this one?
no, I'm hearing the message. It would be
Okay.
nice that that tree at 610 was taken care of. The only other thing I would suggest, I mean, I've shared the tree trimming is going to occur starting next week on an email chain, but I think it'd be nice for your process to include at least one or maybe multiple mailers so people aren't surprised, because not everybody has email. I'm 62 years old and I'm the kid on my block.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we put signs along the streets. And
Oh, there you go.
done that on this one or not, but yeah, more notice is better.
Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Do we have any more public comments for items not on the agenda? Not seeing any more hands. All right, so moving on to manager and staff reports.
So I'm gonna keep this really brief and only talk about one item. I believe 2 meetings ago, I'm not sure, we talked about NOAANET and possibly taking us to collection.
Mm-hmm.
They have turned their invoice to us back to collections. Dan and I had met with NOAANET, at least Craig Nelson and Mike Henson said, they had billed us monthly for this bill. We could not find the information. We asked them for the information. We did not receive monthly bills. The monthly bills we did receive, we paid, we have returned checks. Mike did a lot of research for us. We're not sure of the process, how things go. On a phone call from the collection person, they were going to send an email explaining the information we can send to them and kind of put our side to the story.
Well, it's really interesting. It's like they're sending a bill to collections, but they have no copy of the bill.
Well, they have a bill they put together after the fact. They just wrote a bill for 30,000 and sent it, and that's the one they took to collection.
Okay.
So it's a bit peculiar that we weren't able to negotiate something with them, because if the money goes to collections will take, I believe, 50%.
I'm not sure that, why we're in this process. We are,
I sent a message to Craig Nelson today to put this on an executive session for the next meeting on this Wednesday in Olympia. I don't think I've got a response from him yet. I'll reach out to the president of the board as well if necessary to discuss this. Kind of where you're going with this. Is this the best path forward? and Kevin mentioned we'd had a meeting with Craig and Mike, and it was cordial in my opinion. And we, they offered to give us whatever information we needed. And again, I don't know where Kevin was at in the process. It's been a little less than a month since that conversation. And so I don't know if staff if we've done all of our due diligence with reaching back to NOAANET, because Craig, and Mike discussed it, that they would give us whatever it was we requested or needed. I don't know if that's the case, if we received what we asked for, or if we've asked for everything. So, I mean, if staff would reiterate one more time, the due diligence process here of how much back and forth conversations and exchange of information has there been in the last 30 days? So is there something we're missing here? Or are we just playing at a disagreement, a stalemate, loggerheads, or whatever over this particular bill?
From staff's point of view, we weren't at a loggerhead. It seemed like they took it to collections quickly without talking to us, and so I don't know.
So I'll reiterate, is there any more due diligence that we have all of the information, like Jeff said, a bill for something, that never transpired or was not contractual, or, we didn't meet the contract? I mean, can you elaborate a little bit more on?
I still don't think we owe the money. That's why we haven't paid. We pay our bills. There's still a little bit more research we're doing specifically on the responsibilities of NOAANET and turning in our records to the government for the broadband side of things. I don't know if you guys remember, but when they quit monitoring, the broadband team had to do our own filings with the federal government. The reason NOAANET said they couldn't do the filings for us is because they weren't monitoring. And we're waiting for those. I got to get those dates and that put together. But again, it's not just kind of a curious thing. It's something we're going to have to deal with and work through.
So one more quick question. This one's for Joel. As far as the gone to collections, as I operate at NOAANET, is this something I can speak at in open session at NOAANET, or is this something now that's at a point that should be dealt with in executive session at NOAANET with just the board? Where am I at position here of being able to talk about or discuss this situation?
Other than, I guess for the PUD, if we were at a point where we would be talking about strategy, how to defend ourselves, strategic position to take, that might be appropriate to talk about in an executive session. But, at this point, to be candid, it's not at all clear that they have a contract that we signed that we owe them this money for. And it seemed to me that when you go to collections, you have to have a contractual right that you're going to show. And we keep asking them for the contract that shows it. In fact, what we've found is that we were clear that we didn't want them to provide the service that they believed that they were going to provide, and now are billing us for that service that we didn't want at the time. And there's correspondence that demonstrates that. So, and the other part I'll just, I would encourage you to bring up if you're at the NOAANET meeting. I mean, there are services right now, I understand, that our broadband department would be absolutely willing to obtain from NOAANET, quite a lot. And they've been unwilling to provide that service to us. So, that's money that's on the table. I know it's a separate deal, but they've sort of wrapped these two things together. They've said, you owe us all this money. And so we're not going to provide you with these services.
I got a different question for you, Joel. I'm probably gonna listen. I may go to Olympia. I don't know. I got a sick kid at home, so I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go Wednesday or not. But this is messy to me because we sit as, Jefferson PUD has a seat on the NOAANET board. Okay, fine. advising Noanet on taking official actions as board members. But then separately, when you have that organization or the staff of that organization basically threatening legally us, how does one participate in a meeting with that as background? It just seems really strange to me.
Well, are you asking me this question?
Yeah, I guess any guidance. you have.
So, you know, it's,
Your infinite wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. Help
well, I would never call it infinite, but
Foggy. This is
and
foggy.
you may not be satisfied with this answer, but you know, it's at some point it's common for these types of organizations, you know, especially on the energy side, for sure, it's common where you have wholesale providers who, you know, sit on the board of the wholesale power supplier, and the customer is the retailer, and you're, you know, an elected commissioner on the retailer. So it's quite common. You do have to parse out the difference. But, you know, as a member of that board on the executive committee, it seems to me to be relevant that, you know, their Noanet's practices, they should be able to show us when they billed us, what the basis of the bill was for, what our contract said, and what we specifically owe. And that's what we've asked them, and they haven't been able to provide that. So, I mean, in terms of it is messy. It's just the way it's structured. But, you know,
It's just awkward too. It's like
It
we
is.
actually are interested in getting a quote for services, but the staff isn't willing to give us a quote because they're saying we owe them for past services, which they can't provide the invoices for or the agreement for. So it's like, who's supposed to be the adult in the room when? this is
Well,
going on?
and there's going to be a workshop scheduled, and obviously I'm hearing consensus from our board, legal counsel and general manager that this is an issue, you know, that we need to work on at the board level there, and see how the other utilities are viewing this particular instance, or if they're having instances of their own that we don't hear about or know about, so that we get some consistency as ownership as to, you know, what exactly how is our situation different, you know, than everybody else's. If we can't get the information provided for a service and the billing of it, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed at Noanet, not just here. So
Yeah.
and
Well,
I'll just, I'm sorry, I'd just like to add one more thing. I mean, we did have a fee dispute with Noanet, and them owing us fees on fee splitting for customers. We never once entertained, even discussed the idea that we were going to send that to collections.
right.
And I'm not even sure what that means, to be honest. I mean,
Sending something to
in
collection.
this context, I'm just not sure what that means.
So, Dan, you're in a position where you have to use your own judgment, but it's my perception that bringing this up at a board, at a Noanet board or executive board level is probably politically fraught. And you know better than I, with your more recent participation, that people are going to have opinions as soon as you open your mouth. So I'm just saying that you may be walking into a quagmire, because I can't use other language.
Ambush.
well, and again, you know, I approach every situation pragmatically as I can. You know, again, I think this is something that the ownership, the members, you know, this is an issue that, you know, I think the whole membership needs to be aware of. I want to start out on the executive session side of things. If that's not the way to go, then maybe someone will point that out, that this should be something that's talked about at the workshop or out in the open. I don't know yet. But again, you know, the bylaws have changed, and, you know, there's politics involved with everything. I get that. But, you know, I think that, a partnership with Noanet is in our best interest and in their best interest at the end of the day. It's unfortunate that this particular instance has gotten messy for whatever purposes or reasons. Hopefully we can avoid that in the future. So.
Well, I'm disappointed because I had a call with Craig. Wasn't that long. It was the same time as the meeting, the last meeting. He was coming out of the meeting and called me from the airport. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've directed my finance director to locate those invoices and share them with your staff." And sounds like that never happened because they can't find them and they've just created one bill for the whole, instead of these monthly bills that supposedly were sent to us, which we didn't pay. They haven't been able to produce those, and instead they've created a jumbo bill that they said we should have paid if we had gotten it, and we should pay now. So
And the stuff we sent to Joel, the contract that I think is enforceable shows no monitoring of the equipment.
it doesn't show this service. Yeah.
That is zero.
Yeah, I mean, collections contacts you and you're like, you want this money from me? Well, there was no contract and there's no invoices, so I don't know what to tell you. This is just bizarre. It's a waste of time for both public entities, in my opinion, and it's a failure to be able to communicate healthily at the staff level. So shouldn't even be at our level, frankly. Unfortunately.
Possibly there's some historical context. here.
Oh, I know. I've read volumes 1 through 7. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Well,
So
yeah.
one last thing to Phil's question on the transformer change out. We are a little bit behind schedule.
And sorry, which transformer is this again?
This is where we're gonna take the one from Quilcene and move it to Discovery Bay to Dana Roberts. The new one will go in. We believe the last couple pieces of equipment we found a couple days ago, that's putting us closer to completing our goal. We're not sure how things are gonna go, but the hard part is material. We're going out for bid on steel that we have to have at the substation. When those bids come back, we'll have another piece. So we're still moving as fast as we can. I don't think we'll be completed by the end of December, but it'll be close. It may run into January, but
It's gonna be happening right around that winter peak time.
we're hoping it's warm through Thanksgiving and it starts cooling off in December, but
But it's material really. We can't do it without the materials. So we're
Uh,
waiting.
for example, the fuse piece that we were missing, if we buy them, it's 32 weeks. We found a couple used one that we can get. PSE had one. We're still seeing if we can do theirs. Josh Garlock found one at a neighboring PUD that's willing to give us their old one and would replace it when our new ones come in. So we feel extremely fortunate that we've found the things that we need, and we can now bid the steel towers out, which is huge. And we're getting a contract rate for cement work in both Quilcene and Dana Roberts. So
Okay. So it's actually starting. Things are getting close to starting.
a lot, it's on paper right now,
Okay.
so, but it's getting much closer.
Okay. Any more report
No.
to give? Okay. So we're to commissioner reports. Dan, would you be willing to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first. I had a fairly extensive report, but looking at the time, I'll condense it. I sure makes the
5
room
minutes,
cute.
5 minutes or less.
So, anyhow, I attended the Waputa meetings at Douglas and Chelan PUDs in Wenatchee on September 18th, 19th, and 20th. And we took a tour of Douglas PUD's hydrogen production plant. It was quite interesting. Just one note on that was, one of their commissioners told me that the budget for their first year of operation, it's going to show a net positive revenue. So,
Wow.
And
And
the
are they
first
actually in production or is it still all
no,
under
it's,
construction?
they're still under construction, but that was just, I had more, but that's the short version. So, at the Commissioner Education Roundtable, Chelan PUD, GM Kirk Hudson gave a presentation on energy resource adequacy. I'll cut that a little short, and also talked a little bit about the Columbia River Treaty, the details with Canada. They're being scrutinized by the mid-season particular. They have some concerns. They also made a presentation at the PPC meeting here a couple days ago when I was down there. So maybe I'll touch a little bit on that further on in the report. Attended several of the Waputa committee meetings on September 19th. At the water committee meeting, Waputa staff and lobbyists talked about Waputa strategies for the upcoming legislative session. There was also, I should probably mention this one too, since and maybe Joel's heard a little bit about this. There's also a discussion about records requests to PUDs regarding the types and locations of critical water infrastructure and whether that information is protected from direct disclosure, for obvious reasons, bad actors and that sort of thing. So there was some back and forth between different utilities, legal counsels saw it from different viewpoints. Joel, any insight into whether or not you think they're standing for that, us to redact certain parts of that kind of information, or you think that it's in the statute, it's fully?
Well, I would have to take a look at, there is an exception for national security type
Yeah. So
information and documentation, but I'm not sure how far that goes.
Yeah, and I'm just putting it on your radar that that's.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I attended the Waputa Board of Directors meeting on September 20th. Scott Wilson from BPA talked about the current water year and the revenues for BPA. There won't be a reserve distribution payment this year on the energy side. There conceivably could be a small one on the transmission side, but they're also looking like they may just keep that money for reserves. So because there's going to be a lot of transmission activity, it looks like, in the next years or two on building out on the transmission side. They also talked, excuse me, about the BP 26 rate case. That's a 3-year rate case. Normally they're 2-year rate cases. And so it looks like there's going to be a 10% or higher increase adopted for that 3-year period. So, and my understanding is that's 3% every year during the course of the 3 years. That's just an estimate. Former State Senator Tim Sheldon gave the Energy Northwest report, talked about some of the projects that Energy Northwest is pursuing. And one of those, and maybe Jeff's going to talk about it, I don't know, about their micro reactor project with Westinghouse. Again, not a lot of detail from my angle on that one yet. Later that day on the 20th, I attended the BOC special meeting with representatives of Finley Engineering and their involvement with our broadband projects. Let's see, I'll script through some of that. I attended the Quilcene Fair on September 21st. There wasn't much interest by the public to see the work that's being done, but I found the tour fairly interesting that Will and some of the staff gave. And thanks to staff for offering that tour, even though we didn't have many takers. I had a phone meeting with the general manager on September 23rd. Later that day, I met with a customer in my district to view a danger tree. That was Mike. So I'll skip through that since we've had that discussion. On September 24th, I spoke to a customer in Quilcene who reached out concerning the placement of broadband connections on his residence being in an unsatisfactory location. Staff's aware of that situation. Later that morning, I attended the Kitsap PUD board meeting in my capacity as secretary at Waputa. From that meeting, I left for Spokane and the Waputa workshop. I attended the opening session of the workshop on the 25th. Interesting presentation by a gentleman, Mike Hamilton, whose background is in cybersecurity. He talked about AI and the issues that a growing dependence on AI tools could pose to the utility sector. And that was more of a negative approach than a positive approach. I'll just leave it at that. I attended the session on municipal water law, and Jose was there as well. So thanks to Jose for going and hearing all that stuff. So staff is well aware of the things that are being talked about. Anyhow, the discussion by around Department of Ecology's Policy 2030, which is Ecology's interpretation of the municipal water law. And Ecology is going to be setting their policy here at the end of the year. So there's a lot swirling around about how Ecology is looking at municipal water law. And again, not to the favor of municipal water systems. Would be my take on the discussion. There was a session on the 26th on funding resources, policy, and regulatory issues that were laid out by the Washington Department of Drinking Water. Dave Christensen was there from Ecology and talked about ways that Ecology is looking at increasing potable water through the management of wastewater and stormwater being more available to go back into the system.
Like an aquifer recharge?
No, that would be one, that would be the likely. Now, whether or not they're going to go to a spigot somewhere, I can't speak for what Ecology's thinking about in that aspect, but my guess would be it would be for aquifer recharge. But I don't know. Again, there was a lot of things there discussed. I don't know if it went into that level of detail. Interesting lunch discussion, presentation by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on quagga and zebra mussels, and how steps are being taken to ensure that those invasive mussels can be kept out of Washington waters. They've progressed from the east to the west over the decades, and Washington is still fairly well insulated, but they're starting to show up. So they're doubling down on that, on how to deal with those, because they'll clog up the intakes and outlets of the dams and for the power generation and other things that could mess up a lot of hardware and infrastructure. Cybersecurity again was another session topic at the end of the meetings, and some of that was around the process of how to deal with your insurance companies on cybersecurity and how they view it versus how, if you have an incident, how the FBI wants you to approach it. So there's some conflicting direction there about how you should deal with cybersecurity incidences. On Friday, September 27th, the commissioners gathered for a roundtable on water funding and capital improvement. The final session of the water workshop was with State Representative Keith Gaynor about informing the legislature on issues that water utilities are facing, like in particular water rights consolidations and utility relocation, those sorts of things. Attended our BOC meeting on October 1st. I attended the PPC member forum on October 2nd. That was basically representatives from the Northwest Power and Conservation Council gave an update on at the midpoint of their 8th power plan and talked a bit about the process for the 9th power plan and how that will shake down. Let's see what else. I attended the PPC Executive Committee meeting on October 3rd. The election for PPC Executive Board will be announced at the November annual meeting. Again, the Mid-Seas, Douglas, Chelan, and Grant gave an update on the Columbia River Treaty draft settlement with Canada, and raised some questions about just how advantageous the proposed treaty language and details would be for BPA members. So that was a quick overview of that one. More detail about that to come as the year plays out. Met with GM Street on October 4th. I attended the Jefferson County Fire Chiefs meeting earlier today. I will attend the NOAANET meeting in Olympia on October 9th. I will attend the ICG meeting on October 10th, and I will meet with GM Street on October 11th. That was the short version.
Okay. Ken?
Having taken some vacation time, I'll have an even shorter version. So I attended the September 20th special Board of Commissioners meeting and also met with the general manager. Following day, the 21st, I also was at the Quilcene Fair for our fiber celebration. Got to ride in a bucket truck, actually in the front seat rather than in the bucket this time. More comfortable. Met with the general manager on the 27th. Attended the special BOC meeting on the 30th to talk about well, let's just say I attended the special meeting. October 3rd, I attended the EDC board meeting, and I'll briefly touch on what was discussed there. There's going to be a pinch in their budget because they had anticipated funding from the Reconnect program to start much earlier. In fact, because it's handled, they're a sub-recipient. Peninsula College is the main recipient, so the money has to flow through Peninsula College first, and it's on a reimbursement basis. So they're going to look at their budget and decide what sort of adjustments and tweaks they can make in order to not spend all of their reserves. And the meeting largely focused on developing an economic framework for development. It's a useful discussion. And they are still looking to fill, I believe, 3 seats now on their board. And there was a discussion as to how to go about doing that. The best way to attract people who have particular skills. Let's see. So, met with the general manager on the 4th, looking forward on Thursday to attending the ICG meeting, and I'll meet with the general manager again on the 11th. And that's my report.
Okay. So since our last meeting on the 18th, had a meeting with Kevin Street, listened into the Waputa meetings that Dan discussed, and I'm sorry I missed the hydrogen tour, but I'm sure it'll be around for a while, so there'll be more opportunities to learn about that. Attended our special meeting on the 20th and was at the Quilcene Fair a little later in the day, got the tour, and it was really well done. It was cool, even though it was small. We were small but mighty group of people. Attended our PUD special board meeting on the 1st, listened in on the PPC meetings on the 2nd and 3rd. And then let's see, I'm getting my dates mixed up. And then looking ahead, I will either be at the NOAANET meeting or I'll listen virtually. The ICG meeting, I will be there. And Dan, your question on the Energy Northwest, their next meetings are in October, the 23rd and 24th, and that's at Public Power Forum. All I know about that micro generator thing is I think Energy Northwest was providing some services to, is it GE? Is that who was?
Westinghouse.
Westinghouse. I think it was like they had some sort of services contract, but I'm sure we'll hear an update in October. But it was just, we had a presentation, I think in the summer from
It sounds like the project.
a Westinghouse, somebody.
Right, with a micro reactor or something.
Basically, somebody from Westinghouse came early in the summer and did a presentation to the board talking about this critter. And that it was really meant to be kind of at the point of use of energy. And then I had heard since then some industrial proposals, like one in Canada. And I don't know if there's anything, I hadn't heard of anything
Like
specific.
military bases in Alaska.
Yeah,
really remote places.
They talked about that, yeah. And they gave a price point of around 20 to 25 cents a kilowatt hour. So to operate one of these things. So again, micro reactor, and I can't remember if it's using the same HALEU fuel as, I can't remember what kind of fuel it uses, but.
Yeah, because I won't make the October meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be there, but I'll bring back what I learned. So that's what I have, and we've made it through the
Consent.
commissioner reports. I think we have time to do consent. So the only thing I saw in consent was a financial report, but I don't think there's really a financial report in there, is there?
No, they got getting attached to the agenda, so it will be on Tuesdays.
Okay,
I
so-
sent it to the commissioners just so you guys would have a chance to review it before the budget hearing tonight. But it did not get attached to the consent agenda, so it'll be on next Tuesday's meeting.
Okay, so consent agenda, we need to strike 7.3. Okay. I didn't have any other issues with consent.
So I'll
agenda
make
other
that
than
motion to strike 7.3 in the consent agenda and then accept as amended.
Second.
All in favor of approving the modified consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're not going to make it through the wild mitigation draft. And I'm just going to do a quick time check just so we know now. Do people have hard stops tonight for time? Checking? Not really? Okay. Then we'll just.
Six-ish.
Six-ish, okay. We will proceed. So we're gonna hold old business and new business, and why don't we take, anybody needs a quick break before 5 o'clock, we can do that.
And got
Good evening. It is 5 o'clock and we're coming back into session. This is the Jefferson Public Utility District. And we are at the point in our agenda when we are going to hold a public hearing for the 2024 budget. The purpose of this hearing is for the PUD Board of Commissioners to consider the 2025 draft budget. The public hearing is now open. I ask your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The PUD will be making a digital recording of the proceedings. When you step to the table or the microphone or from your chair, begin by stating your name and district and indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or as a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the commissioners. Before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
Yes, there is.
So I'm going to start real quick before Mike does his report. Mike has spent a lot of time putting the budget together. A lot of work goes into the budget. I'd like to thank Mike for his work on this, and budgets are hard work and a lot goes into them, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. To a lot of people, it looks just a bunch of numbers on a page. I'm just saying it's a lot more than that. So I appreciate Mike and his team doing the work they do. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Kevin. And we're gonna do that. I'm doing this one a little bit different than what we've done in the past. Same format, the budget that's in the budget packet that's in the board packet tonight. But instead of just bringing up the PDF file and going through it, kind of did a PowerPoint presentation to highlight some of the things that are happening in the budget. Kind of like what I've done the last couple of meetings, just to make it a little bit more interesting than just looking at a PDF file of it. So we are looking at the 2025 budget. Some things to keep in mind. We do have the FCS group is in the process of reviewing rates and conducting a rate study. We're pretty sure the FCS group will be recommending rate increases for 2025, which have not been included in the budget. They're still in the early stages. Hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll have some information to bring to the board on where they're at on some things right now. The budget is the guide to the financial path that will allow the PUD to operate day to day and as well as complete capital projects. And we use a balanced budget, meaning that we try to make sure our revenues cover are equal to or greater than our expenses, including the capital expenses. Just highlighting some of the budget foundations.
So on the balanced budget approach, if we're going to have declining reserves, that really doesn't mean it's a balanced budget, does it? Or are we expecting reserves are going to stay static?
Well, reserves and taking our expenses to compared to our revenues is a little bit different. The reserves are the cash in the bank. So and then what you're saying there, Dan, is no, it's not, because we are going to end up using some reserves for capital projects, but our operating expenses will match our revenue. Our revenues will match the operating expenses.
So just to be clear, so the public kind of understands how the budget will get executed, that's where we'll go to balance it, is in the capital projects. That's where the money would not likely be spent that's being budgeted, correct?
Correct. And we can also save some more expenses, save some stuff, save on some expenses.
So I just
if
want
we
to
need
prepare the public for, our 4-year work plan and things like that, and the anticipation that we're going to move substations and things
Yeah.
like that, that there could be impact.
How we budget is a balanced budget. How we actually do everything is a little bit different, but we try to make sure that the revenues that we don't budget more expenses than what revenues we know are going to come in. So we're conservative on both sides of them. We're conservative on the revenues, conservative on the expenses. So just highlighting some of the budget foundations. These are things that we put where and how we come up with numbers. Our revenues for electric and water are based on the 4-year averages, as well as the 2024 rates. Revenues for broadband, they're based on our estimated connections that we think we're going to be having in the next few months, plus some 2024 revenues of connections we already have. We did the tax revenues, which is part of the discussion tonight, is we're going to split those 80% to broadband and 20% to water. We increased our expenses 3% based on the consumer price index over 24. We budgeted for 18 vacant or new positions. And then our capital projects are based on work plans, needs, and predetermined work areas related to the grants. And then we're new this year is we've always done it, but we're putting more of an emphasis on improving safety and creating a culture around safety. So we're calling that out a little bit more in the budget. Things were already there, but we're just doing it more, showing it now. Kind of in the discussion we had a little bit earlier in our part of our regular meeting, we do include $1 million for tree trimming. It was 1.2 when we first started. We took a couple $100,000 of that out because that we can do as part of our capital budget and not as expense, because it's the first pass through wherever you build can be capitalized. So some of our broadband that we're trimming for broadband can be capitalized, but for the electric, it has to be expensed. So it's a little bit of both there. So we kind of moved the dollars around to show that we were doing some in capital. And then also per RCW 54.16.100, and we are getting ready to do a compensation study that's in progress. We included $200,000 for raises in the administrative and general expenses. Basically, RCW just says we have to tell the board that we just have to put a note on there that we did this. And then the principal and interest payments are based on the amortization schedules for our loans and our bonds. So now looking at the utility budgets, our operating revenues for electric are $48.7 million. The total cost of service is $44.3 million. Our operating margins is $4.4 million. Non-operating margins, this is aid to construction, any miscellaneous income that comes in was 1.8, gives us total margins of $6.3 million and a net tier of 3.44 and a net debt service coverage of 2.39 for electric. The water, we're right about $5 million. Total cost of service is 4.9, gives us about a $56,000 operating margins. And there again, AJ Construction, the tax money, non-operating margins are 379,000. They're bringing in 436,000.
Hey, Mike, I had a question on that one.
Yeah.
Is there, one of the things I was trying to track was where does the grant money show up? And I can't remember if we have any grant money that's in the water budget for next year.
Not here in the
370.
cash flow budget. Part of that will show up.
Okay.
Where we can do it. Now, as on the broadband, because we have received some grant money, that's why the non-operating margins there are so high, because I knew when it was still coming in, I just carried some of that over. And then will be additional grant in the cash flow that will show where the money's coming in.
Okay.
So on the broadband, 953,000 in revenues. They got about $2 million in for cost of service. So they're actually operating at a 1.1 loss in the operating margins. But because of grants and their tax revenues, they got $11.8 million coming in for non-operating margins. So they got total margins of $10.6 million. So as a combined utility, we're looking at almost 55 million, $54.7 million in operating revenues for next year, $51.3 million to run the businesses. And then that gives us operating margins of about 3.3 million. Then with the grant money and everything coming in, it's $14 million. So our total margins are $17 million. Reading the wrong line there. So this kind of gets in the cash flow budget, so you can kind of see how each utility will run and do the projects. So for electric, the total margins that we have available for projects is 6.3 million. Unfortunately, we got construction projects at 12.7 million, other general plant purchases of 547, long-term debt of 3.7 million. We add back in our depreciation because that's a non-cash expense. So that's 6.3 million that actually supposed to help cover part of our capital costs of doing stuff. On this one, we do have some grant and loan funds that are coming in. Will was able to get us a grant to help do electric vehicle charging stations. So we get $48,000 from the state. So our total expenditures for everything would be $10.6 million. That means we have to take $4.3 million besides what we have coming in and everything to do out to get all that covered out of cash reserve. So basically, the $4.3 million is out of cash reserves.
So. And Mike, on the $12 million in construction projects, if we're short on our reserves, what happens to that project?
We hold off on that project until we either have the fund, make sure we have the funds available. And that's not just on the electric side, on each one of these.
Mm-hmm.
If the reserves aren't there, if the money's not coming in, we put the projects on hold. The only ones that we don't put on hold is the ones that we either have grant money coming for, or the ones that we have a loan or something for. We have guaranteed money for. But usually on those, we have to put the money out. It's kind of like what Ken was saying earlier with the EDC and the reconnect. It's a pass through. It's reimbursable. We have to pay for it and then get the money back.
Well, and somewhere in there, it had us showing like 8-some million of unrestricted funds. And if we proceeded with all these projects, it would take it down to like 2.8 million or something. So when you say putting, we'll hold off if we get to a certain level, what is the floor that management is comfortable with on cash reserves? When does that red light come on?
We have a finance and risk management policy. You gotta keep that in mind.
So, Mike and I are putting some things in place now to monitor the budget. If you remember a couple of years ago when we were really starting to get heavy into broadband, our reserves got down to about $4 million.
Mm-hmm.
We were watching that weekly. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure we were staying about that $9 million with our line of credit, which is $5 million, and our $4 million plus took us above $9 million for reserves. With everything we have planned and the funds going out for broadband, we are going to watch closely, but it's that $4.5 million is
Okay.
about where we have to be. And probably moving into 2025, financials have to become a little bit more important in either every 2 months meeting. There's things like that we really are going to have to make sure the board knows where we are and why we're at the place we're at. Yeah.
So Mike, without getting too wonky, can you explain from where was the depreciation added back in? And it's treated here as if those were real dollars. And yet I don't understand how it decreases the money needed to proceed with our capital projects for electric.
So I went back up to the utility budgets. This is, so in that total cost of service line, that $44.3 million on electric.
And that includes the depreciation.
That includes the depreciation. That includes a $6.3 million in depreciation. So our operating margins are less than $6.3 million. So that's why we're adding that, because it is a non-cash expense. We treat it in the financials, it's treated like we paid that cash out. So it reduces our total margins by that. So when we go to look at what we actually need to pay to do projects, we can say, okay, this money we did not really spend anywhere. So we're adding it. It's really available. That $6.3 million is available. So really our margins, if you take out the 6.3 million, you're looking at $10.7 million in operating margins. If you take the 6.3 away from the
Got it.
44.
Finally.
Okay.
Got it.
But, and also on that line, on the total cost of service, one of the concerns I have is looking at our cost of purchase power. And now over the long term, I know it's going to get really crazy. I don't know about the short term per se. I'm really concerned that we're making sure that we have that number really nailed down to what our cost of power is going to be, that we're not undershooting it here. So, because that's going to affect those margins and things at the, as the budget progresses in 2025. Because along with that, I'm concerned also about revenues, the trajectory that we're on now. If that continues, that revenues are also going to be less. So those two lines, when you start to add those things together, could really affect that margin at the end of the day. That's capital aside, just
Yeah.
those two things alone.
And those are the things that we watch and we look for. And one of the things that helps us now that we can actually better track with our funds available is we are our own treasurer. We have access to our bank account every day. We can see what's coming in and going out every day. We don't have to wait on a report that's a month behind schedule. So that helps us even better now, being able to review and see what's going on. So going back to the cash flow budget, so you can see in water, this kind of goes back to what Jeff, you were asking just a little bit ago, is we have the 436,000 total margins, but we have a $3.6 million in construction projects and $60,000 in general plant purchases. We have principal of 633,000. They have about $1 million in depreciation. Without that back in, we still have some principal and interest that we receive on LUDs. 442 roughly. We have a grant loan combination from the state for the Coya water project, water main. So we're adding in, so that's reducing that says we don't have to come with $2.6 million. So that's why their total expenditures only look like there's 208,000 there. And they actually bring in more money, actually add a little bit of money into the reserves of 228,000. Broadband the same way. We have the $10 million in reserves, $15.1 million in construction projects. We have another 60,000 in general plant. We do have the small business loan. It's about 387,000 for principal. They have a small thing of depreciation, just we haven't capitalized as many things for broadband yet. And then, so on top of the grant money that I already included, we have probably roughly about another $3.8 million that we can get in 25. So their total expenditures are $11.7 million. So their cash outflow is going to be a little over $1 million. So as you can see, combined, we got $17 million in margins. We have $32 million between construction projects and general plant capital projects. $4.8 million in principal, $7.3 million for depreciation. We add back in the LUDs. We got $6.5 million in grants and loans that we are adding. So our total expenditures for everything is $22.6 million, which means our outflow is we have about $5.2 million that we have to put out next year based on that, if we do everything. And if everything lines up the way we're predicting it to line up. So I just want to kind of show some of the changes in the electric utility budget from when we first produced the budget and first presented the budget to the board on August 16th to the one that I did for getting ready for this meeting on 9/20. Didn't change the revenues between looking at changes in the BPA stuff and other expenses. We did increase our expenses about $500,000. So we dropped our net operating margins, the $500,000, changed the overall net margins by the $500,000, and it changed our tier and our debt service coverage just slightly a little bit, still within the well above where we need to be for our loan covenants and stuff. So same thing here with the water utility budget, kind of showing how we changed. We actually were able to reduce expenses. Part of this just the way we figured few things by 617,000, increased our operating margins, because when I first presented the budget, they were losing $500,000. They're now making money, so that's where the 617,000 makes up the difference. Then just a little bit of change in the net operating margins of 37,000. So their total change in net margins was 655,000. Same thing here with the broadband, not just minor changes with them. Decreased, and this part of just the way we calculated some payroll expense things, and did a few other expenses. We were able to reduce expenses by 110,000. So that increased our margins by 110,000. There again, just looking at some of the grant money and how we have calculated the tax money, increased it by the net operating margins by almost 200,000. So they get $310,000 in additional net margins. So this is just kind of showing our electric expenses of the $44.3 million, where our costs are. You know, and like Dan was saying, you know, 39% of our cost goes to cost of purchase power. That's one of our biggest expenses. You know, administrative and general expenses is another, you know, 16%. And then 14% of that is our depreciation. So that's a big, those three right there make up the biggest part of that 44.3 million. So this is just showing where and how the expenses are kind of broken out. Same thing here with water. You can kind of see that between the distribution expense operation, distribution expense maintenance makes up 39%. You add the administrative and general expenses, that's another 26%. And then with another 20 for the depreciation. So that makes up most of that $4.9 million. There's just what it takes to run the system, run the utility. Here in broadband expenses, because we're still kind of getting everything set up, most of theirs is administrative and general expenses right now while we get everything set up and running. We'll see in the next couple of years, probably see this change a little bit more as we get more activity going in broadband. The next one is just the overall kind of breaking down a little bit more as a combined utility. You can see that between labor and benefits and power costs, that's over half of the $51 million that we have to pay out for next year. So, and then with another 14% for depreciation. So, this is kind of a breakdown of our departments. We have 18 departments now. The $21 million broken down for different things. Labor, benefits, contractors, consultants, safety related expenses. You can see our executive, which includes the board, is 25% of that. So the good quarter of it is our executive department, but that's kind of also a lot of the overall utility expenses fall in that category there too. So now we're getting into the capital and debt principal costs. These costs we have a little bit more control over, a little bit more of, we can either hold off, we can go with it depending on where it is. But we do have the $12.7 million in our electric work plan. We have $3.6 million for water, 15.1 for broadband, 285,000 for fleet, 382.5 for other capitals, and about 4.8 million for long-term debt principals. So that's $37 million right there that we have, that some we can hold off on, some we cannot hold off on. So this is just kind of showing some of the things that we're looking at for the $12.7 million in electric capital. We do have the $9.4 million in substation work. And that's including the transformers plus the work to get them all set up and ready to go. We have 125,000 in distribution transformer work that we need to do. Our SCADA network, we have 300,000 that we need to do for it. 550,000 for some warehouse and yard improvements. Just our line extension services, subdivisions, 725,000. Converting overhead to underground is 975,000. To do pole replacements, we got 100,000. Replace the conductor is 200,000. Just other items add up to about 300,000.
And Kevin, realistically, that 975,000 overhead to underground, what does that get us per year, roughly? Does that equate to?
3 miles.
You know, it really depends on the area. We're hoping that would get us about 2.5 miles. It really depends. In some of the areas, we're looking at doing it in conjunction with our broadband.
Mm-hmm.
For example, on Maristone, so we'll get a lot more because it's a shared trench cost.
But you're just kind of opportunities where you're like, okay, it would be great if this wasn't overhead anymore because it's just a real pain. And
based on outages and stuff. If
Okay.
we have a lot of tree work, a lot of stuff like that, it makes more sense.
okay, and is some of that also replacing failing underground, or does that come out of a different?
That would come out of a different bucket.
Okay, good.
So has that decision been made to underground the fiber on Marrowstone and as well as bury the electric?
We are gonna come back to the board in a future meeting, and I believe staff's recommendation is gonna be to do it now. That would be one of the priorities that we would set in the 18th meeting. But I think it's a good idea for that, at least along the main road, Flagler. The decision hasn't been made, but we're working, getting the drawings, getting the costs associated so that we can come back and make a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
Going on to the water capital, the $3.6 million. We have a Bywater Bay water main looping that we want to do for 183,000. Coil distribution piping replacement for 146,000. Quimper distribution pipe replacement for 383,000. Just general pipeline replacements for 175,000. This is the one that we just added since we started the budget, is the coil water main replacement, because we got a loan grant from the state to do it for $2.6 million. So
And how much of that was the loan grant?
was it a 50?
Was it grant or is it forgivable?
Part of the loan is forgivable. I don't know the percentage.
I don't know right offhand.
Do you remember how much the loan was, or Dan, do you know?
It was 2.
Yeah, it's a 2 point.
That's
It's
the
for the whole
amount.
yeah, it's for the whole project.
So then it's just like the Bywater Bay deal. It's like potentially 50% forgivable.
Yeah. I think I know because of the county that we're in and the services.
Yeah.
that it's
Well, that
in.
one should score well. That one's bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
That coil
So,
system.
I think they ended up, it may be a 50-50 split, but I
Yeah.
don't remember, and Will's
Yeah.
not here to help answer that question.
Okay.
And then our wastewater work, we got 13.8, and then just other work that needs to be done is 67,000. That's how we come up with the $3.6 million in water capital.
And since you mentioned wastewater, have we made any progress on getting the job description together for that county
So
position?
we're close on the job description, and actually the interlocal, Joel he's pretty well reviewed it. Long story short, we sent it to our insurance because there's some insurance questions on whether we're covered.
Okay.
That was some of the questions Joel had back to us. So
Okay.
We're very, very close.
Thanks for the update.
Going on to our broadband capital, HUD's buildings, this is, things that we need to help run the central.
And Dan and I know what a hut building is now. We've been inside one.
It's 163,000. Fiber, this is the purchase of more fiber and stuff to continue doing. It's $9.6 million. Engineering, Finley Engineering, as you heard back on September 20th, they've been doing the job for us. We still got about $1.6 million for the work in 25. Our core ponds, we still got about 210,000 drops. This is getting drops to the houses and stuff is about 1.5 million. To purchase some additional ONTs.
What's an
and-
ONT?
It's like the modem.
Okay.
It's on something. Now that you ask me that, I
It's
can't.
part of the equipment.
It's part of the equipment.
Between the fiber, yeah.
It's the modem. It's the thing that goes in your house to make everything work.
Okay.
So it works just like a modem. 771,000, got some consulting still to do for 125,000, and then just other work to make sure everything is getting put in place is about $1 million
Okay.
worth of everything to do. So that's a $15.1 million.
And the labor to build the system shows up where?
So that's part of this is gonna be whether we do it or whether it gets contracted out. That's part of, I think, in the fiber too, is not just buying fiber, it's having the fiber installed.
So it's included in
It's
some of
part of
the
that
line
$9 million,
items.
yeah.
Okay.
So we got the $285,000 for fleet capital. Information technology is gonna get a vehicle, probably for 45,000. The electric utility is gonna get a couple vehicles for 120,000. Water's gonna get one for 60,000. Broadband's gonna get one for 60,000. And there again, on fleet, it has not been decided what type of vehicles they're gonna get yet. So we're gonna look and see what is needed, what best fits those needs. Whether between gas, hybrid, electric vehicles. We're gonna look and see what is the best
And
fit
you're,
for each one.
and you're looking at operation costs and
Operation
availability and upfront purchase
Yeah.
cost and all that stuff.
Yeah, the cost of actually, because, we're finding that, yes, they, different people need different vehicles and have different needs for those vehicles, so. Some other capital items that we need to do for the 382,000 is the installation of vehicle chargers, to do some here at 310, do some at Auto Street as well. We did get the grant, so that's 875,000. I think it's for 6 or 8. I can't remember the exact number. We just have some additional yard improvements to do fix up a few things that need to be get done around here for 67.5. We need to buy a new NISC server. That's that's the software that we use for everything. Customer service, accounting, everything, mapping, engineering, all news that. So we need a new server for that. For 35,000 tools. It's anything over $5,000 gets capitalized, and so that would be included in that. And then just our contracted engineering is 105,000, which is ICPE, Finley. If there's any miscellaneous things that we have to do, HDR, those type of, when we contract out for those for projects and stuff, or just ask questions that we can maybe turn into projects. So just to kind of show a change in the capital projects, because there has been a little bit of change since originally we presented on August 16th to September 20th when we were trying to finalize everything. Most everything, the waterwork plan has the big jump because we did get that $2.6 million that we added for the coil because of the grant money. We did add the 45,000 for the facilities improvements because of the additional electric chargers that we're going to put in. We took away some warehouse and yard improvements because they were already previously done. We didn't need them again. And then we added the vehicle for the information technology. So between August and September, almost a month, we went from $29.5 million to $32.2 million, which is about $2.6 million increase in capital projects. And because I've shown this before and you guys the commissioners have kind of asked about it as we're talking through all our debt payments and stuff, I just wanted to kind of reiterate our electric and broadband long-term debt. These are the principles as of the 1st of October. So between electric and broadband, we have $88.3 million. That's 82.7 million from the original purchase of the utility. The 5.1 million now, we just did a draw for more AMI meter costs. So that one's up to 5.1 now. And that was for the first off Auto Street purchase and the AMI project. And then right now we've borrowed 476,000 for the Port Townsend business.
I appreciate you putting these in there. These are long-term numbers that as we take on these bigger capital projects and we're trying to figure out how to make them pay, it's important, I think, for us to remember where are we at in our long-term debt.
So the Port Townsend business fiber, is that the first time we've gone after that? Because it seemed like that was sitting, as I recall. Or have we been withdrawing?
No, we've only drawn, that's how much we've drawn down.
Okay.
We've had some engineering costs and stuff. We haven't gone too far into it yet. It's on the list of things to do down the road.
Because it was a $2 million loan. And so
Yeah.
this is an aggregate to this point.
Yep, that's what we've drawn down on the loan so far. Just like the first one, the purchase Auto Street office and AMI, it was $5.4 million. We've drawn down 5.1 million. So we got about 200,000 that we're gonna still have to draw down on that one.
Okay.
Then we go to the water long-term debt. This one has a few more things, but it's a smaller amount. It's only 6.6 million total. Again, these are as of October 1st when I was getting everything ready for tonight's meeting. So you can see that we're getting close to paying with it. We got quite a few that we're going to pay off in the next couple of years. There again, still got some long-term one. And I haven't, the last one there, the one for the LUD 17 Shine Plat, that's only actually going to be half of it. I got to move some money around internally to show that we received, because I think we have to show that as revenue the 245,000 on that one. So that will reduce that outstanding balance there. But there you wanted to be able just to show us we're talking long-term debt payments with our capital projects. And it was mentioned that you guys would like to see it again, so I just threw it in this presentation as where, since it was timely.
Yep.
So now moving on, I'm creating this just like the packet is, the supplementary pages. This goes to look at our 5-year look back from comparing to 2025. Did make a little bit of adjustments on this one from when I first sent it to the commissioners and posted it, because I had 22 and 23 as the same numbers. So I readjusted those, but you can kind of see since 2019 to the 2025 budget where and how things. So this one includes both the broadband, where we didn't have, you can kind of see where we've added broadband in these numbers. And just because of some of the increases are due to broadband in the last couple of years. And we didn't have broadband in 19 and 20, at least not too much, I should say. We've had it a little bit more, but
It's nice that the 5-year look back takes us beyond the years when we didn't know the years not to be mentioned.
yeah. Same thing here with water. You can kind of see the 5-year look back, see how things have kind of changed over, gotten better with it, with things.
And this stunned me, the difference between the revenues, you know, in like 2019 to now. That's a huge
Yeah.
increase in
Did-
revenues, which I think
The rate
comes back to
increases.
the rate changes that we made. And
Yeah, we hadn't been
it's just getting
keeping up.
the whole thing way healthier and able to reinvest in itself.
Yep. Yeah, you can definitely see how rates have affected revenues, and different things that can affect revenues and the expenses. And then just as the forecast average, you know, we average revenues 1% growth every year, average about 3% on expenses. So you can kind of just see projected out how the electric and broadband are going to look, because I combined the two budgets for 25 and how they're going to look all the way through 2035. Same thing right here with the water utility, 1% growth, about 3% in expenses. Just to be conservative, kind of see how it's maintaining and staying on an equal growth pattern. Now we're going to our safety related expenses. This is the new thing that we're emphasizing in 2025. And I know Jeff and Melanie aren't here, but kind of some of the things that we're looking at regarding and budgeting for workplace safety, either through capital projects, adding more security to our facilities, and training for employees, making sure that we have the right equipment, personal protective equipment, making sure our fleets are set up with the proper safety equipment, and then just that tracking staff hours spent in safety meetings and learning about safety committee meetings, things like that. The public safety outreach, doing outreaches, doing capital projects to keep the public safe, doing infrastructure security to keep our infrastructure secure, doing the facility physical security just to keep everything where information isn't out and available to everybody. Just environmental, the wildfire mitigation, equipment replacement, just so we don't have any issues, and capital projects to help with the environment. And then the last one here just kind of shows how we got $849,000 roughly in the 2025 budget. Most of that goes towards the prevention of injuries and damages. That's our safety meetings, the equipment to help keep everybody safe and everything. And then you can see we're clothing, some other safety equipment testing and repair of that equipment. And then we now added a safety department. Jeff Dodd is our safety manager. He's got some costs and stuff that we're showing to help maintain and do everything. So just a timeline for the 2025 budget. We did have a draft budget that was posted to the website Friday, August 30th. I did an expense budget update presentation on September 3rd, did a capital budget update presentation on September 17th, did the budget hearing today, October 7th. We'll have additional meetings as needed in October and November. If there's any things that the commissioners have questions on or would like to see done differently or changes that need to be made. The budget does need to be approved by November 30th. The auditor's office would like it mid-November if possible, but it does have, the deadline is November 30th.
Okay, and I see that we've got two resolutions in the packet tonight, and is it safe to assume that if we don't adopt either or both of those tonight, this will just kind of keep reappearing on our regular budget meetings? And I thought I saw a special meeting on October 29th too. I don't know if that's dedicated for some
If we do
purpose.
that, do we have to extend the public comment?
The public hearing will be closed tonight. We can, like any agenda item, we can take public comment as we bring it up, but we have to have at least one public hearing. This is it, but there will be more opportunities for people to
Yeah.
engage.
I do need a clarification. When do they have to have the tax revenues done? Is that at
So,
the same time?
yeah, so both of them are
Okay.
November.
They need to be acted on together.
No, they don't need to be they're two separate things. We have the two resolutions that you're talking about is our budget resolution to approve the 2025 budget and then the tax resolution.
But they have the same deadline, the
But
November
they're
30th.
both in November 30th.
Got
And
it.
Joe's got his hand up. So
Okay,
he's probably going to clarify something too.
Joel.
I wasn't going to clarify that because that's, I trust you, Mike, on keeping track of those dates. Just so for a little perspective to recall, we've done it both ways. The commission has done it both ways. Sometimes you leave the hearing open for further comment. You can close it and have the same effect, but you're
Yes, I
correct, Commissioner, that
Because of the way we behave, I
Yeah.
would prefer, if we can get through it, to close it tonight, but knowing that there's gonna be at least one more meeting, maybe more than one. And when we do those, we always allow for public.
Yeah, I
comment.
just wanted to confirm that the two things didn't have to happen together.
Yeah.
That we can close the hearing and still be in compliance later if we don't
Yes.
adopt the resolutions tonight.
Yes. Okay, so does that complete the staff report?
So yeah, that's everything I had on the budget, unless you want me to talk about the tax portion of it real fast.
Why don't you cover that real quick?
Okay, so we're from the director of the board, we're doing a 0% increase. The information I got is in the resolution is 597,000. We budget about 600,000. We'll turn in the 600,000 because there's like three numbers they look at. And I can't remember exactly which way they do it. If we don't budget high enough, they won't, and we can get higher, they won't give it to us. They only give us what we show in the budget. So,
Can't ask for more, but
yeah, you can't ask for more. There's like
they won't give you more than there is. but-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two or three different numbers that they look at. So basically, and then we'll bank, because we can increase that 1% if annually, if we want to. We've been banking that 1%
Right.
for years.
Quite a long time.
Yeah, I think we're at 20 some percent. I'm guessing,
Yeah.
I can't remember right off the top of my head. It may not be, I want to say it's around 20, but
Right.
I haven't looked at it. I forgot to look at that portion of
It'll
it
be
this year.
another $100,000 or
Yeah.
something.
So that's where, so there's two separate things. Part of it is we need the tax resolution to say, yes, we still want our taxes. We don't want an increase. We'll take what we can get, and then the budget resolution, which are two separate resolutions.
Okay. Any questions for staff on any part of the report? Okay, I'll move ahead then. So that's the end of staff.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Kevin. So now we are at the public testimony part for anybody who wants to formally publicly testify. The floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address the commissioners for an initial period not to exceed 3 minutes.
So quick question on this one. Do we get any electronic or written testimony that has to be entered? Or how does, anything along those lines? Is that something that we would normally have to ask for or make known that we've received anything?
We have not received anything.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone want to testify on the budget? Go ahead, Phil. The floor is yours.
We'll be the only public person on the meeting.
Well, and just to give some context, I remember back in the day when we were at the fire hall and we had a full house. And there's something that we've done since then that I think is kind of dissipated some of the mob effect. It's those meetings that we hold quarterly. so when we get to this point, it's not a big surprise. We've been given budget information all year long and what our plans are. So I think that's helped a lot with the commission feeling comfortable with it, and probably to some extent with the public feeling comfortable what's going on. But please begin your comments.
Philip Stover, District 1, speaking for myself. My comments are about the electric utility section of the PUD 2025 draft budget. The 2025 budget includes 12.7 million for construction projects aligned with a very ambitious for $66 million four-year power work plan for upgrades to the power grid, existing grid and power and infrastructure. The PUD is adding staff, office space, and vehicles to help manage the multiple concurrent projects in the plan. The rate study is underway that's expected to recommend electric rate increases for 2025. The PUD's electric power supplier, Bonneville Power Administration, is also expected to increase its rates. The need for upgrades to add capacity and replace aging infrastructure in nearly all core areas of the power grid in a short period of time is a less than ideal situation, not caused by an unpredictable event like natural disaster. I am concerned that the 2025 budget reflects the beginning of challenges and risks that are unprecedented in the history of the PUD electric utility. Examples include extended equipment procurement timelines and potential unplanned cost increases, concurrent multi-million-dollar project management for major installation work, financial management during a period of increased costs for consulting, construction contracts, staff overhead, and purchase power. I've observed PUD staff effectively meeting much smaller capacity challenges in 2024. However, I urge the PUD commissioners to adjust your focus toward additional oversight of the electric utility, starting with the 2025 budget and continuing through the years of major construction to help ensure the best possible outcome in terms of future electric service and rates for all PUD customers. And I urge the PUD staff to improve power grid infrastructure upgrade and replacement planning to avoid a similar unforced spike in construction activity and cost in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone online who would like to comment on the 2025 budget? Going once, going twice. Not seeing anyone. Okay. The staff have anything to add to address any of the testimony given? Nope.
No.
Okay. This is funny. Are there any persons in the audience who would like to add non-repetitive information or evidence about this matter?
I do have one question that
There you go. Be difficult. You got to make up for the fact. Solo act here.
District 1, speaking for myself again. Is the coil water main replacement or what thing, is that related to the big leak that we had earlier this year? And the reservoir was somehow being depleted because old rupture. I'm trying to understand, was there a budget impact of that leak that is reflected in the 2025 budget?
I'll just say that I know that we've known that the coil water, so the water system from the tank is new and kind of working down from the tank is new, but then you've got all this infrastructure that's very, very old and it's been breaking a lot. And I think isn't this to replace the entire, everything that's old is getting replaced in the coil, but some of the things are new, beginning at the tank and working their way down. So do you have anything else to add?
This was an older system when we took over. There's a lot of small leaks throughout the system. The pipe needs to be replaced. So this is a major thing that, gosh, I've been here 12 years and I think they've been talking about it for about that length of time.
They use a substandard piping when it was approved by the county. Yeah. So it's a bad system.
So where was the leak that Mr. Stover's referencing?
I think the one, and I may be wrong, I know the city of Port Townsend had a big water leak due to old pipes
Yes,
coming out of City Lake, does not affect our water
right.
system
So,
at all.
Okay, so that's the clarification I was looking for. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah, the city did have due to old piping and that sat up there. From what I understand, is it did sit there for length of time before it was realized that they had a leak. That then created a boil order for the city of Port Townsend, but that's the city of Port Townsend, does not affect anything with ours. The coil one, we actually had a loan 2 years ago, a year ago.
2 years.
That we didn't go ahead and proceed to follow up to do this project. So this project's actually been in the works for a while. We now have money for the whole project and we're gonna do that. But yeah, the one that you're talking about was a city.
Well, we've had 4 major breaks on the coil system from
Yeah,
January 1 to 2 weeks ago, so.
we have had, but not the big, huge one where it caused a water boil. Because of the old pipe.
I naively assumed that if there were a huge leak, that we would have heard about it.
Prospectively, at the coil, they were big leaks for that system.
Yeah,
That's, you know, that's been, as you said,
Yeah.
Kevin, that's been leaking for as long as you've been here, which is a little longer than I've been here.
Okay, so do the commissioners have any questions related to the public testimony or any additional information from staff at this time? Seeing none. All right, I am going to declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. And so we've had a presentation. We've got 2 resolutions in front of us. Do we have appetite to approve the tax levy resolution tonight?
Yeah, I'm fine with moving that one forward tonight.
I'm good with it.
Okay, let's have a
So I'll
formal
make
motion.
the motion to accept the resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Public Utility District Number 1 of Jefferson County, Washington, that we do not need to increase the regular levy versus the district's prior year's levy amount, not including increases that are exempt under RCW 84.55. That is the correct resolution, is it
Yep.
not?
Second,
All right, we have a motion and a second for the tax levy resolution. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. So the tax levy part is done. So now we have the bigger budget resolution. How do commissioners feel about what's been presented? Maybe we can just start with a little discussion.
I'd say maybe there's still some things that we want to look at as far as costs and revenues and trajectories that we're on. It maybe not tonight. We just hold off a couple more weeks or meeting or 2 or whatever and see if anything else develops that could be helpful or maybe something else that's detrimental that we can have a little more insight into. Because again, the capital projects, I think that's gonna be interesting to see how we're able to prioritize and do those projects. So a little more time might be helpful.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. I guess some questions I have too. It's not directly related, but it is related because it's money. The capacity charge discussion and when are we going to see FCS? When is that process gonna happen?
Capacity charge will come back either on the 15th or the 18th. We're not sure of the exact date, but it'll be next week.
I guess do we have board meetings? Okay, yeah, we have 15th.
Yeah, we have a couple more meetings.
Yeah. Okay, and then we've got the 18th. Okay, so we may see something on that. Okay.
And then FCS, I had an email from them a week or so ago. They need at least a month, maybe a little bit more to get their first meeting set with us. So
we'll be lucky to have that happen before the end of the year.
I'm
it
gonna
sounds like.
say it's probably the December meeting.
Usually we just have one meeting in December. Yeah. Okay.
But the deadline for the budget is November 30th.
30th.
30th, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got at least 3 meetings. So within 2 meetings, I would think by the
So
end of the second meeting
So,
should be.
so staff, you know, what we would like to see, and I'll speak, I'm not speaking for staff, I'm speaking for myself. But we would like to see if what you all would like to see so that we can put it together. Because
Right.
right now, we've presented, if we get a little feedback saying you'd like to see X or Y, that would help us put the next meeting together.
Right. Do we want,
Yeah.
we've got a tremendous amount of information that's been presented, and I really appreciate like the debt stuff. That was new information that we've asked for in the past.
Yeah.
So are we feeling like we need anything additional to what we've got?
Well, again, and I don't, this might be asking the impossible for staff at this point, because again, there are big components to this budget that are kind of just out there still. And I don't know if we'll get any resolution or not. One of those is staffing. You know, what are the levels of staffing really going to be? What's truly can we do? Are we, you know, again, how much are we budgeting for that? And is that really the accurate amount?
That's a really good question, because there's that point that's listed in there, 18 positions, but there isn't really any listing of what those are. Is that something that could be provided, or what?
So staffing.
Yeah.
And we can address this a little bit. And this is why there's a little bit of leeway in staffing. We received a quote from our contractors to come in and build drop service for fiber. You know, I have to be careful here. The costs were to the point we should probably hire some additional people internal for staff.
It's the discussion we had when we were looking at linemen.
And
I mean, it's the same
it's
discussion.
Same discussion. The dollars would fund staffing for a couple of years. So we are looking very closely at that staffing. The
Mhm.
same thing we're doing with flagging. We're gonna hire some flaggers.
Right.
We can give you ballpark what we're thinking of. But if we get an exceptionally large quote to do work in-house that we could better hire local people for, that would come back and say, okay, this is part of our 18.
Let me add one thing, I'll let you go. Could you do something where maybe you broke out the different divisions, and without saying, here's the description for all 18 positions, maybe talk about each one? In the water division, we're looking at possibly adding these people in the electric and the broadband, just so we know. I mean, I
Yeah, we
think that
can-
would be helpful.
I do have that kind of, as long as Kevin's okay with it, we can talk general. We have job titles and maybe not necessary job descriptions right now, but we have that.
I'm not even looking that specific, just kind
Yeah.
of generally what
Yeah.
kinds of positions, like a paragraph each for each line,
Yeah,
each business
I think it's
line.
something we can add.
The overview.
Yeah, an overview, exactly.
Yeah, and I think another month may give us some time, maybe something presents itself or things develop differently than we were expecting to, that, that number could have to be adjusted upward rather than downward, as far as staffing goes. And then to your point, the capacity fee, I think that, again, that's on the revenue side of things. If we do see an uptick in the cost for some of the reasons Kevin just laid out in labor, we're gonna have to make up for that somehow, somewhere. Do we cut back on capital, or will something like the capacity fee offset that? The
So
revenues that we could see.
that-
And I'm just using the capacity fee as one of the ways that revenue would come in. There could be other ways that our revenue has to change.
That information is almost impossible for us to put together at this time. We can give you what we think we're gonna hire for people, and we can justify the wage. It's like the flaggers we're talking about. We hire that out. We feel now we can do it cheaper in-house. So there are some pluses and minuses, some janitorial services. We think, we hire that out. In the janitorial service, we're not gonna save any money, but we get here people every day versus 1.5 or 1 day a week. So the cost is there. We're looking at maybe working with the port and splitting a new FTE so that we don't have the full brunt of those. So we can give you the pros and cons on what we're looking at.
Well,
Yeah.
and like one of we're budgeting full cost for the wastewater.
Yeah.
Person, which is part of those costs are actually gonna come back
It's gonna
to
be
us
reimbursed.
through the county. So there are a couple of things like that where, as we're saying, these are the positions that, okay, here's why we're hiring this person, this is what's gonna happen with this, because there are the two opportunities of splitting basically a person with another agency and doing it. And there are, like Kevin said, there are some where we've looked at costs and said, okay, is it better to have it in-house and have a little bit more control over where and how things are done compared to continue paying outside services for that?
And like I said, we have a lot of things in play that maybe another month, some of that stuff becomes clear. I'm not asking staff to do a bunch of work still on things that we don't know. Just maybe things will develop out in a way that we can make a little bit tighter judgments on, revenues versus labor costs versus capital, what might suffer and need to be prioritized on the capital side. That's just the way I'm kind of looking at it at the moment.
Well, in the way I'm thinking about it, I think it'd be helpful for us to get some additional information like on some of these new hires and maybe roughly how much money that might mean in a business line, if you've budgeted those in, roughly how much you've budgeted in, just so we have an idea on that, because sometimes having the information allows us to think about things and ask other questions. So I think that would be helpful. My feeling on the budget is I don't know that we're going to end up probably maybe even changing anything. I think we, having a little more time to look at it, but I think maybe adopting it sooner than later might be good, because I think these things like the capacity charges and the new rate fees and things, I feels like when we get the budget done earlier, it gives us more capacity to start working on other things that are hard and take time. And I think we've done a lot of work on the capacity charges. It feels like we made a lot of progress, but I remember last time it felt like we were running into a few things that were kind of gobstoppers a little bit on like some of the commercial services and public projects that were like gulp, what do we really
So are
want?
you kind of thinking or making suggestion that we're going to have a supplementary type of a budget process at some point in the near term then, if we were to go ahead and confirm this budget now?
Well, I mean, the budget is a plan. So when we adopt the budget, we've adopted it. I don't know that we've ever had to do any sort of supplementary thing unless something catastrophic happened, like we need the cash reserves have
Well,
gone way
that's it. The
below.
cash reserves is the first thing that comes to mind, and the cash flow and cash reserves.
I'm hearing that the manager is intending to manage the budget in such a way that we don't fall below 4.5 million to comply with our cash
So
policy.
We've agreed to approve the budget either in the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Yeah,
So-
I think so.
And I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so if that's as much information as we can give back to staff, I think we're good. So we adopted the tax levy. We're gonna hold off on the resolution on the budget. And that bounces us back to old business, which I don't think we had any.
No,
And then new business, we've got the wildfire mitigation plan.
and I can do this in 1 minute if everyone can be here for
Sure.
just a pinch
Yeah,
longer.
just go ahead.
Go for it.
So the fire mitigation plan is a template that we fill out from the state. It was worked through by co-ops, municipal, a lot of people did a lot of work. So the bulk of the plan is boilerplate from the state. We have added, by we, is Scott Bancroft has gone through and added the specific things that our PUD has to add to the policy. This is a first touch. We can go over it on the 15th to keep this meeting a little shorter. And then if there's any questions, we can hold those over to the 18th, which we already have a meeting scheduled. And we will bring a resolution back that it has to be adopted though by the board by the end of October.
Has to be adopted, or it has to be submitted by the end of October?
We have to have it submitted by the end of October, but we want a resolution from the board saying that you have looked at it and you approve the program.
So I don't think that we have to do anything with the boilerplate, but it would be helpful to have the ratings, you know, you had a legend to explain where we were on different responsibilities of Jefferson PUD. So my suggestion is you have that up front for us to review.
And I didn't make it to the whole plan, but I just found a number of, typos and missing headers and things like that that were probably not part of the not boilerplate. So I asked Kevin who to send comments to. So I think if you find anything that's just like typo related or an abbreviation that isn't explained, you can send it to Scott, and I was just gonna CC Kevin, and that way, hopefully, the next draft that we get at the next meeting will be a little more cleaned up.
Yeah, I looked at it and I really wasn't looking for punctuation, spelling, or any of that kind of stuff because, like Kevin said, it was kind of a template, and we fill in some answers. I thought maybe that kind of stuff would get caught before it does get submitted. I thought it was really good. I'm thankful, to staff for all the work that they did on that. I wondered if the org chart was broad enough that we put in there, because I know we call out a lot of different positions and the responsibilities of those positions, which is really good. I like the granularity and the direction that we're giving to, how the staff, the hierarchy works and how information gets passed along. So that was all really good. And how our representation to EOC, and things like that work. And then the Firewise info at the end for people that want to go in and read it. That's another way for them to see, that information of how to be more prepared, not just the utility. The one question I had was further work that we're going to need to do as utility on our policies was on 7.7, which was the public safety power shutoff clause. That's something I think staff should keep that on their radar or front burner or back burner maybe as to where we need to go with that part of the plan and policies that need to be associated to that.
So staff is working on that, but that is a huge can of worms that we don't want to talk about this meeting or the next couple.
Yeah, again, I just want to make sure it was on the radar. That's something we do need to keep that in mind and address it in some way, shape, or form. And I'm sure legal counsel will play a large part in that.
There's some engineering review. There's a lot that goes into that we're working on. It's not an easy task, and it is very time consuming.
And we're also at the end of the line, and a full requirements customer at BPA, and they have their own issues with that as well. Something to keep in.
I read in there was that we're required to adopt it and submit it, and we're required to review it at least every 3 years. But presumably, if we came up with something like, hey, we think if the drought rating is this and the fire hazard that's adopted by the districts is this, and we've got a storm of wind exceeding this, we may do some localized shutoffs in places. That if we come up with something like that, we could update the plan presumably sooner than 3 years if we felt like we needed to.
From staff's discussion, we think this will probably come back a year from now, maybe a little bit longer, but there will be a newer plan as we develop some of the protection and some of the goals we are looking at with engineering and how to accomplish some of this.
Okay.
One other quick question for insurance purposes. Does this help us out on the insurance front at all, or unrelated totally, or what's the interaction there?
Then from the meetings I've gone to, it doesn't change anything on insurance. We are still going to be held accountable if it's our fault.
Table 1 has, this kind of tells you how far I got into it. Just some basic information about our utility, and where it says service territory makeup, no data available. And it's asking for like, how much of your area is urban and agriculture and barren and blah, blah. I'm just wondering, I realize our time is short before we have to submit this thing, but I'm wondering, could we collaborate with like the city and the county to their GIS departments and say, hey, can you guys come up with percentages of our county that fall in? Okay. So did we ask this question?
We asked this question. It has to come from the state and their census blocks. And because we are only part of East Jefferson County, we're not Jefferson County. it has complicated this.
Hmm.
This is one of the things that will get cleaned up later on.
Okay,
But we left it that way based on talking to the state.
well, we can fill in some data later as we.
When I
okay.
found it interesting, was it agricultural 0.0058% or something of our
Yeah.
service area? It's like that.
A
That's
lot
an
of-
interesting number. It's like,
A lot of those numbers are from the state and they are. Everyone's working on these plans, so they couldn't help us and we were complicated because
Yeah.
of our service territory.
Well, I'm glad, I'm glad we're approaching the problem. It's a real problem. Wildfire is a real problem, but we're approaching it trying to be proactive. So I think it's good. All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of our agenda unless staff has anything else.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, so we'll expect to see the wildfire mitigation thing next time. And if you have any comments, get them back.
We
soon.
send them to Scott. That works great.
Okay.
They'll incorporate the changes in information.
We got the levy approved and the budget stuff will probably come back also. Or will it?
No,
Yes.
the budget will come
Yeah,
back.
come back.
If-
I will just be remote. I'm leaving.
We don't need you.
Sure we do. Okay.
Yeah, no, I will be remote, but yes, I will have the information that the board asked for before that meeting.
Okay. It is 6:10. We've reached the end of our agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi,
Good night.
everyone.